Hey YouTube, what's going on? Common Collector here, and today you're joining me on our new and improved set. I've been doing a whole lot of new stuff going on here. Today we're talking about the lore of Evil Eye. So I haven't really done any discussion videos like this before, but I thought it would be really cool to sort of go down the rabbit hole and go into sort of why these cards are in the same archetype together, along with sort of their relevance, and then in the future we'll do other videos on what we possibly think could come into this archetype later, such as other things that fit into this, like how ghost tricks, they started with, you have your mummy and all of that sort of stuff, werewolf and things, and then it just sort of kept expanding and whatnot. So we're going to kind of dive deep into some of that stuff later, but first of all, let's get back to Evil Eyes. Sort of the way that I started this was it's so easy with Evil Eye to just sort of look at the two of the main monsters are you have your basilisk or basilis, and you have Medusa, and you go, okay, easy, those things are related to stuff with evil eyes. That's where it comes from. They're evil-eyed. And then you get to Surzeal, and you're kind of like, well, he's like their boss monster, so that kind of makes sense too. But then you get to Catabopass, and you're like, well, what the heck is that? And you just think, and I always just sort of was like, hey, that's just a big buffalo guy that looks evil and kind of has some murky eyes, and I didn't think anything of it. But my last week at Locals, I was just sort of sifting through some Magic the Gathering cards for an unknown reason, and I found a monster, or whatever you call them for Magics, that was a Catabopass, and really great artwork, really cool, and I just really loved it. And I looked at it and I went, wait a second, like, this isn't just a Yu-Gi-Oh thing, this is something that dives deeper, like this is more than just related to Yu-Gi-Oh. So I thought that there was probably a little bit of research that I could do to find out more. So that's why I want to put this video together to sort of dive deeper into the things and why they relate to these cards and whatnot. So anyways, let's just keep going on. So anyways, one thing that we got to kind of look into when we're looking at an archetype is what is the archetype. There are heroes, elemental heroes, and you go, okay, those are superheroes. You have ghost tricks. Those are things that are related to Halloween and all these old fairy tales. But what are evil eyes? Well, there are a lot of things in mythology and whatnot, especially Greek mythology, which we'll go into in this video, that relates to things being evil-eyed. Things that have a deadly gaze or a deadly look. See why I call myself the Common Collector now? I buy a lot of stuff. Now, going on into our first monster discussion, I think that the most obvious choice is Medusa. So, if you know anything about Greek mythology, Medusa was one of three sisters. They were called the Gorgons. Now, the way that Gorgon relates to Evil Eye also has several layers. You have the new equip spell, the Evil Eye of Gorgonio. You also have Gorgon, Empress of the Evil Eye, the new Link monster. So there are a lot of different examples of that, which is a little interesting that, like, Gorgon and Medusa get so many layers to this, while some of the other monsters and spell cards and whatnot are really just like a one hit. But so basically in Greek mythology, you have the three Gorgon sisters, one of them being Medusa. The other two sisters were Sethino and Uriel. Not sure if I said those names right. The story isn't totally clear what happened between the three sisters, but for some reason, in Greek mythology, Medusa was the only of the three that was mortal. So she was actually killed by Perseus. If you've ever seen the movie Clash of the Titans, that was made back in 2010, I believe, you've probably seen that before too. But basically the way that it went down in Greek mythology is that Medusa had some relations with Poseidon, the god of the sea, and Athena was really mad about that. So what she did was she cursed Medusa to be tragically ugly, and I believe that the other three sisters, it's really not totally clear in mythology, but the three sisters all had hair of snakes, which you've probably seen in a lot of imagery elsewhere. but and really not on the card, which is interesting. If you look at Medusa's artwork, she does not have hair of snakes. But basically, the way that it goes is that Athena cursed her to whenever a man looked in her gaze, he would automatically turn to stone and die. So again, goes with the whole theme of evil-eyed. You look into her eyes, you die, you turn to stone. There are a lot of different monsters that are in the game that are related to Medusa. You have reptilian Medusa, I believe there's a Medusa worm, there's a normal monster, the snake hair, mythical beast Medusa, along with Venomanaga, the deity of poisonous snakes, who probably relates and looks to Medusa the most. You know, her artwork is pretty true to form of what Medusa is said to have looked like. Some depictions have Medusa with the body of the snake, some don't, but pretty true to form, especially with the Clash of the Titans movie. This is sort of what a lot of people picture when it comes to Medusa. I believe that there are a lot of other Medusa appearances in film and books and whatnot. Back when I was a kid, I saw Medusa in the Hercules TV show, and I believe that there was some other things along the way, but definitely something that has been depicted a lot. Probably even just heard about it in history class or anything like that. And then along with the whole theme of the Gorgons, there are other Yu-Gi-Oh cards that are also Gorgons. There's the Reptilian Gorgon, so you have a Reptilian Medusa and Gorgon. You also have like the entire Gorgonic archetype, which I think is pretty interesting that they made this whole thing. Kind of funny that they seem like they should be reptiles or something, but they're all rock types because Medusa turns you to stone. Going on into one thing that I really want to dive deep in this new series is how does the effect of the card relate to the you know, sort of the lore of these creatures, stories, whatever. So I think that the easiest way to look at this is, again, not trying to totally revert back to Clash of the Titans over and over, but if you've ever seen the movie Clash of the Titans, the way that it goes down is that Perseus needs to destroy the Kraken that's going to the city of Argus. Release the Kraken! We all know that part. So basically what happens is Perseus goes into the underworld and he goes to Medusa's lair. He's able to slay her by looking into his shield and using her reflection in order to find her, and he slices her head off. That's pretty true to the overall story in Greek mythology. But besides that, he then takes the decapitated head of Medusa, and then he goes and flies to Argus, and he's able to produce the Medusa head in front of the Kraken, and the Kraken turns to stone. The way that I think that this really relates to the Yu-Gi-Oh card is not Medusa's first effect, but her second effect when equipped with the Evil Eye of Selene. I believe that a really cool way that they sort of intertwine this into her effect is that her second effect banishes one monster in your opponent's graveyard. Much like how Perseus had to destroy the Kraken with Medusa's evil eyes, I believe that it's really similar to how Medusa is able to, instead of killing directly or anything like that, she banishes. So she doesn't banish on the field, but she is able to banish from the graveyard, being able to eliminate those threats that could possibly hurt you later on in the duel. Moving on from Medusa, I think that the next fun topic of discussion is the Basilisk, familiar of the Evil Eye. Now, most of us should be familiar with the Basilisk from Harry Potter. I would assume that there's a strong correlation between Yu-Gi-Oh fans and Harry Potter fans. So we all know how the Basilisk works. If you look into its eyes, it will automatically kill anyone who looks into its gaze. Very similar to Medusa and all of the other cards that are up for discussion here today. The one interesting thing about the Basilisk, in the Harry Potter story at least, is that if you don't directly look into the Basilisk's eyes, it will only petrify you. It will not kill you. So Hermione Granger figures this out, and she uses a mirror to cut across corners, and then she sees the Basilisk, and it petrifies her, along with a lot of very convenient ways that happen in the story. I actually thought that the basilisk was an exclusive J.K. Rowling invention for the Harry Potter series, like the Thestrals and all that stuff. Turns out that it's actually a legend that's been around for a long time. If you go to the Harry Potter Wikipedia, it'll actually say that the basilisk was first invented in 79 A.D. I don't really know what was going on in 79 A.D., but I just think that it's amusing that it's that year specifically. Like, someone's just walking around like, hey, you know, the death of Christ was like 79 years ago. Hey, I also had a toad sit on my chicken egg the other day. Guess what came out? A chicken? No. A frog? Or a toad? No, not even close. It was a giant chicken snake. One thing that I found that was interesting in my research on the basilisk from the lore, I really don't want to go around saying that the basilisk is a real thing. I'm sure someone's tried it, like someone's been like, hey, let's put a toad on top of a chicken egg. What could go wrong? Actually, fun fact is that J.K. Rowling got that swapped around with the wrong mythological creature. There's another creature which I will put, fair warning, this picture I'm about to put up is absolute nightmare fuel, but I hope you guys can handle it. This thing is called the cockatrice. Now, the cockatrice is basically a reverse basilisk. Basically what it is when you have a chicken egg and you incubate it underneath a toad, and then that horrible creature comes out. What a basilisk actually is the opposite. You have a toad egg with a chicken that incubates it, and then out hatches a basilisk. So I guess J.K. Rowling probably thought it was more whimsical the other way around. But I just think it's funny that these two creatures exist in mythology. They're the exact opposites of each other. One is a chicken snake, the other is a snake chicken, but she sort of swapped them around for some reason. Now, one of the other threats besides the gaze of the basilisk is its poisonous venom that comes out of its fangs. This is actually how Harry Potter almost dies, but conveniently there was a phoenix, which is like the one cure for the venom. But anyways, as the myth goes through history, is that the basilisk's venom is absolutely so poisonous that if a basilisk actually drinks from a water source, like from a lake or some sort of a pool of water, it will actually taint that water source for centuries to go. Meaning that if you actually drank from that lake, or even if you swam in it or something, that water would be so tainted and cursed for so long that you would actually die if you drank it within 100 years of that basilisk even encountering that body of water, which I thought was pretty interesting. Another account that I found along my research was that there's a tale of a man who was trying to hunt down a basilisk, and the basilisk was trying to flee. He actually shot it with a bow and arrow from far away, and when the basilisk's skin got punctured, that is a hard word to say, when the basilisk's skin got punctured, all of the blood and the venom actually started escaping from it and going down onto the ground. And then the man who was riding on horseback, actually the horse ended up submitting to the strength of the venom, that it fell down, as well as so did the man. The man and the horse both died just from the blood and the venom trailing down onto the ground. So really, really crazy. Like, that's just how extremely powerful this is. A few weaknesses to notice about the basilisk. First of all, if you look at the actual Yu-Gi-Oh card, it is a pretty weak monster. It's got good defense stats, but its attack is actually pretty weak. I think that this kind of holds true due to the mythology. If you look up its two weaknesses, I think that it's pretty entertaining. First of all is a weasel. A basilisk can actually die by being urinated on by a weasel, which I don't know if that's your game plan, but if you're going into battle with a weasel, I don't know. I wonder if that was actually like a thing with J.K. Rowling, like how Harry Potter was going to save Ginny Weasley. He brought Ron Weasley with him, and the only weakness is a weasel. Who knows? Anyways, going on, its second weakness is the crow of a rooster, or a cock crow, as you will. So that's why also in the Harry Potter books, all of the chickens were killed by Ginny Weasley under the control of Voldemort. So there's actually a deleted scene, I believe, in the Chamber of Secrets movie where Hagrid is walking around with a bunch of dead chickens and whatnot. Maybe it's in the main movie, not sure. Just one more thing while we're talking about animals is that they say that spiders flee from a basilisk. That's all obviously from the Harry Potter books. I wasn't able to find that in any of my research on this fake animal, but anyways, I digress. Going on, we do have a few depictions of the basilisk in the Yu-Gi-Oh card game. First of all, we have Heraldic Beast Basilisk, which I think looks a lot more like a cockatrice, if you ask me. Not that I'm an expert on the situation. I feel like I'm kind of becoming an expert on them, but yeah, probably not. Looks a lot more like a cockatrice. Going on, secondly, we also have the mythical beast Basilisk, which I don't know why they called it the Basilisk. I also don't know why they called the Evil Eye one a Basilisk. I also looked that up as well, and in the Greek language, Basilisk actually means king, and from the Harry Potter books, we do know that the basilisk was referred to as the king of all snakes. So I guess full circle, that does kind of work together, but I wish they would have just kind of called it a basilisk. Going on into the effect, we have to talk about actually how this all relates to what the effect of this card does. So I want to go to its second effect, which is that once per turn you're able to pitch one of your Evil Eye spell or trap cards into the graveyard from the deck. I believe that this actually kind of goes a little bit with the whole storyline of a water source. Think about how water is really the essence of all life. You have to drink water in order to live. And then if you think of it that way, your deck is sort of like your body. It's your essence right there. Like that is the essence of your whole game, is what's in your deck. And if you think about the way that the basilisk could actually taint an entire water source just by drinking from it, it's almost similar to it gets itself out of the deck, but the deck is so tainted that something poisonous and venomous is still in there and takes something along with it, sending it to the graveyard. That might be a little bit of a stretch. Going on into the first effect of the basilisk is that it can special summon itself to the field as long as you have another Evil Eye monster already on the field. I think that this sort of goes well with Harry Potter in another similar way, how it's sort of like a master and servant sort of paradigm going on there. Tom Riddle tells Harry, the basilisk won't come unless I call for it, which I think is very similar to how, especially if you look at the card Evil Eye Mesmerism, you have Cerseal in the background with a corrupted looking basilisk in there. Evil Eye Mesmerism is basically the in-archetype crackdown for the deck, where you're able to snatch one of your opponent's monsters and then you can link it off or something like that. But I think that it works really well with the whole theme where you have this Evil Eye Basilisk who is sort of under the control of Cerseal. He gets called to him from the hand, and then you're able to do your other effects and move on with your turn. Moving on now, we've got the big boy, Catabopass. Basically, the Catabopass is both a Ethiopian as well as a Greek mythological creature. It was discovered, or at least thought up, in Ethiopia, which is in Africa. Basically, similar to what you would see as a wildebeest or a water buffalo of any kind over in Africa, is basically what the legend of the Catabopass is. And if you know anything about mythology, a lot of the times it's usually just stuff that gets really exaggerated, like the Loch Ness Monster. How people think, well, you probably just saw a big collection, like maybe you saw a big snake, maybe you saw a big collection of seaweed or something. It really doesn't mean that there's necessarily a big sea monster in Lake Loch Ness. Similar to that, we have the Catabopass, how people believe that it was actually thought to have been mistaken as a wildebeest. People would get in interactions with them, they would be found dead and whatnot. I'm not sure exactly how aggressive wildebeest are, but we all saw what they did to Mufasa. So, yeah. The name Cannibal Pass is actually of Greek origin, and when translated, it means to look downward. If you look on the card, and really any other depiction of a Cannibal Pass, you always see it with its head so low to the ground because the myth goes is that the creature's head was so heavy that its head was always hung so low, and it wasn't until it would rear its face up that when you would look into its eyes, it would instantly kill you. And again, I think that this sort of goes with the whole exaggeration of stuff like that, where you probably have a situation where by that, they probably mean that if you were close enough to see this thing in the eyes, you were probably dead. Because if you get in front of a wild creature or something like that, it could theoretically kill you. More people get killed by cows annually than they do by sharks, so I'm just saying. I would know because I did grow up on a dairy farm. So again, what are the powers of the Cannibal Pass? I already mentioned how the eyes work. Very similar to Medusa, I guess more similar to the basilisk, how if you just look it directly in the eyes, you will automatically die. But if you do look at the card, as well as the Magic the Gathering card, you will also see one thing that holds true really similarly to the overall myth. And that is that if you actually inhale the breath of the Cannibal Pass, that will kill you as well as looking into its eyes. Which that's why if you look at the card, it has this aura around its mouth. It's got air coming out of its snout, and it's almost like a really poisonous aura around it. So really cool. I thought that was really neat when I read into the story. Furthermore, just a few other fun facts that I learned is that in the legend, the Cannibal Pass is not a herd animal like you usually do see wildebeest and other cattle, stuff like that, are usually herd animals. The Cannibal Pass is a loner, and so don't go near this guy because he doesn't even have any friends. Also, if you go and there was this one website I was looking at, and it said weaknesses unknown, which I thought was terrifying. You at least know that the basilisk is afraid of roosters. So, and if you piss on it with a weasel, it'll die. So, for some reason, that works for a giant chicken snake, but when you have this evil-eyed water buffalo, weaknesses unknown. Depictions of the Cannibal Pass are actually still in Yu-Gi-Oh! Besides this. There is one card called the Cannibal Pass and the Witch of Fate, which, enjoy looking at that. That doesn't look like a very scary, I think they could have just called this like the Bull and the Witch or something, but they made him a Cannibal Pass, and I don't think he looks very terrifying there. Going on into the effect of the Cannibal Pass, I don't believe that there's any really obvious reasons why this card has this effect. It's very nice that it has the effect to bring itself back to the field. That way you can go ahead and link climb and go on into like your Gorgon and stuff like that. But besides that, I do believe that there is a small similarity that you can draw from this in its first effect, which is that once per turn you're able to add protection onto your Evil Eye of Selene equip card. So I do believe that, if you sort of look at it from this angle, that it's breath that can kill you, I believe that is really in many ways a protection thing. Just like how a skunk will fart and then it smells and people don't want to go near it. A tarantula, anything, a snake, they'll lunge at you in order to scare you, but they're mostly going to try to flee. So maybe in a way, this whole thing with the Cannibal Pass and its deadly breath, I believe that in a few ways it could be argued that it's a protection thing, and I believe that that's one similarity that you can draw into the card. Next up, we're going to talk about the field spell card, Evil Eye Domain Pareidolia. So first of all, we have to ask, what is a Pareidolia? Well, when I started playing this archetype, I had read the card to my friend Tyler, who you guys have seen in previous videos. He's a bit of a nerd, and he really likes all this sciencey stuff. And he goes, oh, Pareidolia, that's when you see a face in any kind of an object. And I went, oh, Okay, I guess that makes sense with Evil Eyes and whatnot. And then I sort of dug a little bit deeper, and then I looked at other cards and where you can see pareidolias in those as well. If you look at Surziel's artwork, I think his is some of the best. His or her, I still can't decide if that's a man or a woman. If you look at the card Evil Eye Repose, looks a lot more like a woman. But anyway, I digress. If you look at the stomach of Surziel, you can see belly button there, as well as what looks like two eyes. And then I believe also if you look at his shoulder and whatnot, there's very clearly an eye right there on his shoulder. Looks very reminiscent of the evil eye of Sauron from Lord of the Rings, if you will. So I think it's really cool looking at him as well as some of the other cards on where you can see eyes. If you put the two equip spells, which in my opinion look so much like the Dragon Ball Z Scouters, if you will, you put them together and you see a face. So I think that it's really cool when you can see the whole archetype theme in that as well. A pareidolia, however, can really be anything. It can be when you think that you see a pattern in something, or if you hear something when you're listening to certain music. It can also be when you stare at the clouds and you think that you see a certain shape. But most of all, people agree that a pareidolia is when you see a face in an inanimate object. And you can see that directly right on the field spell card, Evil Eye Domain. You see a face right at the entrance. And if you look a little bit closer, you can see the high tower windows and whatnot. Those sort of look like a bunch of eyes and faces as well. So really cool. I'm glad that they included that field spell in there as well. Okay, next let's talk about the Evil Eye of Selene itself, the main equip spell of the deck. It's the card that really makes all of your plays happen. So what does it do? Basically, it adds massive protection to your equipped monster. It boosts up your monster by 500 attack every time you activate that monster's effect, or every time you activate another Evil Eye spell or trap card. So you're able to get some really beefy numbers on these guys, as well as it can also pull itself out of the graveyard if it's in there by paying 1,000 life points. But what does this have to do with Evil Eyes? Basically, in Greek mythology, Selene was the goddess of the moon. If you actually look at busts of her or statues and whatnot, her headdress actually usually has a half moon or something to that effect on there. Other depictions of her have her sitting on the moon as well. Usually always a half moon or a crescent moon, something like that. Which then if you look at the equip spell, you can see in the artwork that they did make that one a lot more curvy and whatnot. So I think that's really cool that they added that in there as well. Besides that though, how does it actually relate to evil-eyed things? I think that really the only similarity that you can make is werewolves, which we still have not seen in this archetype yet. But also, first of all, the archetype is only 1 year old, as well as we still don't really have any connection to werewolves having evil eyes or any powers with their vision or their eyes and whatnot. However, whenever a man who is a werewolf stares at the moon, that's when he turns into the werewolf. So I think that that's really cool that you can kind of make that connection right there. Going on into the Evil Eye of Gorgonio. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking on Gorgons and whatnot, but also we still do need to talk as well about Gorgon, Empress of the Evil-Eyed, because she is sort of like the new boss monster of the deck ever since she came out of Chaos Impact. A Gorgonio is just really a general term for a Gorgon, one of the three sisters, including Medusa. So, again, what was a Gorgon? A woman that had hair of a snake as well as could turn men into stone. And then if you compare this to the Evil Eye of Selene, you can see that the jewelry on the card is actually a lot more gems and stones, if you will. So I think that that's really cool that they added that. So you have the half moons for Selene, the literal goddess of the moon, and then you have Gorgonio, or a Gorgon, who turns things into stone, and her equipped card is bedazzled with stones. I think that really the only similarity that you can make between Evil Eye of Gorgonio and Medusa is the fact that Medusa was cursed, so much like how you are consistently paying your life points with the Evil Eye monsters. You're constantly hurting yourself, bringing yourself closer to the brink of death, much like how Medusa was cursed and sentenced to a life where anytime she looked at a man, she automatically killed them and turned them into stone. In a lot of ways, a lot of people would think that that's something that could hurt you, and I believe that is really true to the myth, is that she could no longer be with a man romantically or just in the company of a man, otherwise she turned them into stone. However, there is a little bit of power that can be derived from that. Obviously, Medusa was a very powerful creature, which is why Perseus had to go and slay her. So I believe that the way that the equip spell does relate is that you are hurting yourself, cursing yourself, getting close to that point of death, but yet you are rewarded with this really huge power that can make you go in for the huge OTK swings that this deck is getting known for. Finally, the last two cards that we have to talk about were the original boss monsters that came in the Infinity Chasers set. We have Surzeal and Zerzeal. So obviously these cards are nothing that came out of original mythology or anything like that. These are just made up for the archetype. Believe me, I looked. But I figured we could at least sort of break down the base words of these cards and try to figure out why they were named this and how it can kind of relate. So first off with Surzeal. The first part of Sur meaning to line up or organize, and the second part of Zeal, which can mean end or soul. So I think if you look at it from a certain perspective, you have Surzeal, which is the person who is trying to bring together the end. We have a lot of destructive qualities of all of these cards, so I think that Surzeal is sort of the card that represents the end of all of this, sort of like an apocalyptic sort of situation. He also very similarly just sort of rips apart one of your opponent's monsters and sends them to the graveyard. So in a way, the part of his name that relates to the soul, I believe, is pretty appropriate as well, how he can destroy a monster and he sends them to the graveyard, killing their soul. Next up we have Zerzeal, who altogether is a pretty unimportant boss monster for the deck now that we have Gorgon. However, his name would relate more to tough or to scold, and while he was the original boss monster of the deck, I believe that he actually is a pretty good source of how you can finish off games. I have been able to finish off a few games, a few matches against people where I have sent my Gorgon as link fodder for Zerzeal, and then re-equipped him with the Evil Eye of Selene to get his ability, as well as to be able to attack twice. So I believe that he is sort of a tough, solid creature, and just sort of like this whole demonic feel for Surzeal and Zerzeal, and how Zerzeal's name also can mean to scold and stuff, and then they have the root word of zeal, which can mean the end or soul. I believe that those are just really cool sort of names that they kind of brought together in order to top off this archetype. However, I do believe that there is a lot more that we can dive into with this archetype. I already mentioned earlier the cockatrice, as well as the other two Gorgon sisters. So I do believe that there is a room for this archetype to grow, besides them just creating these made-up monsters like Surzeal and Zerzeal. So I really do believe that there is room for this archetype to grow, and I will be discussing that in my upcoming video on sort of a custom cards video, if you will, or a how to fix Evil Eye. So I haven't really solved the title for that yet, but if you guys are interested in watching that or interested in me making other videos like this, please hit that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it, and we'll catch you guys later. If you guys want to check out my Evil Eye deck profile, I will be leaving other links to that as well, so please check those out. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and we'll catch you guys next time.